It's John Moore here, and I am a shamanic practitioner and teacher from the state of Maine. And if you look behind me, you'll see some snow. Just a little bit of snow, but it's the first real snow of the year for us, or not the year, but for the season anyway. We're now in December. Up here, people might refer to that as a dustin', meaning we just got some, light dusting of snow. But I think it's so pretty. It's so beautiful, and it puts me in the mood for Yule and Christmas and the other winter holidays. We're in the middle of Hanukkah as I record this. Diwali is past, but lots of holidays coming up. And so I wanted to do kind of a fun video and celebration of the holidays, and particularly Christmas and Yule, and talk about, is Santa Claus a shaman? And I wrote an article about this back in 2018, and it's tongue in cheek because Santa Claus is obviously a mythological figure, and a lot of the legends and things having to do with Santa Claus have been incorporated from many different cultures. Now, first of all, there was a historic Saint Nicholas who lived in Turkey, and my understanding is a patron saint of pawn shops and children and all these things. And he used to break into young women's houses and leave gold coins in their stockings so they wouldn't have to turn to prostitution. I guess kind of a nice gesture if you don't count the breaking and entering part of that, which, Santa Claus is known for. So some of that legend obviously comes from, this historical guy, Saint Nicholas. But I definitely want to talk about the shamanic connection to Santa Claus and where some of this comes from. So, and I realize that there are Santa-like figures around the world. We have Père Noël in French-speaking areas, and Father Christmas, and different names for different kinds of characters, and they take different forms and they show up on different days and all these things. So I understand that I am speaking from a very American-centric view of Santa Claus, and that different ideas about this character or characters like him that show up during the winter holidays differ from culture to culture. And, there are a lot of cultural things in America that have shaped what we think Santa Claus looks like, from The Night Before Christmas, the very famous poem by somebody who shares my last name. As far as I know, no relation. And, to the images that the Coca-Cola company produced in the, the late 1800s and the early 1900s of Santa Claus in his red suit. There were images of Santa before that where he was kind of wearing green sometimes. Interesting stuff. So let's talk about some of the symbolism of Santa Claus, the mythological Santa Claus, who, comes, so in the U.S., he comes on Christmas Eve, usually at midnight. He slides down your chimney, comes in and leaves presents, and then slides back up, and he has 8 magic reindeer, and he lives in the North Pole with elves. So, where does a lot of this come from? Well, first of all, what is Santa Claus doing living in the North Pole if he's from Turkey, right? That seems kind of crazy. So a lot of these legends of Santa Claus that came to America, a lot of the Christmas traditions, the Christmas trees, and that sort of thing, really come from Northern Europe, particularly, Old Norse and Germanic-speaking areas, and even into the areas that we now consider Scandinavia. And the native peoples there, the Sami people, who are indigenous to that area and lived close to the North Pole, up above the Arctic Circle. So a lot of the symbolism, the living in the North Pole, elves come from that part of the world. Sleigh, right? All come from that part. And reindeer. Let's talk about flying reindeer a little bit. And this is, I apologize in advance, this might be a little gross to some of you. I don't mean to say gross and look pejoratively on anybody's spiritual practices, because they're not. But to many people who come from a similar cultural background to me, this is this tradition is strange to us and sounds a little gross, but so probably would a lot of things that we do to other cultures. So this is not in judgment at all of what other cultures do. So with at least some Sami people, I'm sorry, I mispronounced that. I was crossing shaman with Sami. They are a shamanic culture, meaning that they have as a central spiritual figure in their culture shamans, people who do, carry out specific religious functions and practices. And religion is sort of a, word, but we'll say spiritual anyway. So these shaman are well known for taking the fly agaric mushroom, which are, if you've seen the Smurfs, it's the same mushroom, right? So the mushroom with the red cap with the white spots all over it. It is a hallucinogenic mushroom. It is not psilocybin. The chemicals are different in it, but it is a hallucinogenic mushroom. It's also somewhat toxic. And so, people do on occasion eat them, but you can get really, really sick from doing that. So what these people have done forever is they reindeer herders. They would feed these mushrooms to the reindeer, or they would find the reindeer naturally grazing on these mushrooms. This is where maybe we get the idea of flying reindeer from, right? These reindeer were high. What happens with the fly agaric mushroom is when the reindeer consume them, it actually they collect the urine of the reindeer, which filters out some of the chemicals that are more toxic, that make you sick to your stomach, that sort of thing. But the psychoactive chemicals, the hallucinogens, pass through the urine, and these shamans can actually drink the urine and go on a journey. They can fly. They can, do all kinds of magical things. They can bring gifts from the other side to people. And in turn, and I don't know how widespread this practice is today, but this is recorded in at least historically, they would then in turn urinate into a container, which would be passed around like a gift, and people would drink it and also have the hallucinatory effect. And as it turns out, these hallucinogens can be passed through multiple people and animals' urinary tracts before they lose potency. So this is where a lot of this legend comes from. Now, these fly agaric mushroom, red and white, right? Very, Santa Claus colors, red and white. And, also there's a tradition of the shaman climbing up the tent and sliding down the tent pole, which was also the chimney, right? The fire was in the middle of the tent and went up through a hole in the center. And so this may be where we get the legend of Santa sliding down the chimney from. Seems pretty accurate. So flying reindeer, sleigh, shaman in red and white, all of these things. And the Night Before Christmas is a very good movie, but The Night Before Christmas, the poem that really has inspired a lot of the myth of Santa Claus and the legend and that sort of thing, that made it really popular to this day as a popular poem. Santa is described as a jolly old elf, right? So elves, again, come from that part of the world, Northern Europe. And, elves are, nature spirits and that sort of thing, and Santa's workshop and elves in red and white. So let's talk about another connection between the legends, the myth of Santa Claus, and shamanic people. So again, we're going to Northern Europe because this seems to be where a lot of this tradition has passed into popular culture, particularly popular American culture. We have the Norse god Odin, right? And Odin, if you've seen Thor or you've read any about Norse mythology, Odin is sort of the All-Father, the father of all the other gods, and in fact the creator of human beings, or the person who breathed life into the first man and woman, and all of those things. And he has many, many epithets or names, right? There are lots of things. Odin is one name. He's also called the All-Father, and, Wednesday is named after him, and he's called, I've seen a list of maybe 100 different epithets that they have recorded of him. One of those epithets is the Yule Father, right? The father of Yule, the celebration of Yule, which is when Christmas happens, right? And in some countries, the word Yule is actually the word for Christmas, even though it was a pagan, pre-Christian pagan traditional holiday around the winter solstice, so around the same time as Christmas. So Odin, long white beard in many, many descriptions, long floppy hat. It's also where we get our pictures of Merlin and Gandalf and sort of wizards with a staff and a long hat and a flowing cloak and a white beard. These are and yes, Odin has also sometimes described as a warrior in armor with a spear. So he takes on different forms, as many gods and goddesses from pagan pantheons do. But he's known as the Yule Father, and the celebration of Yule is very closely tied to Odin, who during this time is rumored to, not rumored, but in legend, rides across the sky on an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir, right? 8-legged, 8 reindeer riding across the sky. The Yule Father, giving gifts, bringing gifts to people, from the runes which he took up after he hung himself from the world tree, to the mead of poetry which he stole and then dropped. Quite a tricky god, that Odin. Lots of trickster gods in Scandinavian, in Norse, in the Norse pantheon. Besides Loki, everyone else involved was doing some trickery as well. And so Odin, Yule Father, also associated with shamanism. There are in some of the Norse stories. So the Norse practiced a form of shamanism called Seth, which was traditionally mostly practiced by women. In fact, it was sometimes considered scandalous for men or unmanly to perform Seth, but yet in some of the Norse myths, people are talking about Odin performing Seth, performing shamanism, doing shamanic journeying, and saying, he's being unmanly. But here is a shamanic figure flying through the sky, long white beard, at Yule time, bringing gifts to humankind. And so, again, I think the myth of Santa Claus is pulling from lots of different places. A lot of that comes from these Northern European myths that have to do, or these Northern European ideas having to do with shamanism. So between the Sami shaman and Odin, and perhaps, or definitely, some of the legend of Saint Nicholas from what is now Turkey, we have combined that into our concept of who Santa Claus is, which I don't think is a bad thing. Like, I don't think that I think we create the myths that are important to us, and we celebrate those. And I grew up, as a child believing in Santa Claus, and it really was a magical thing. And when you think about it, Santa Claus has very little to do actually with Christmas, other than maybe the gift giving and the time of year. But there's no real Christian symbolism in the Santa Claus myth, other than the gift giving, or the 3 magi bringing gifts. But we have so closely associated Santa with Christmas now, because that's really it. Like, he is an icon of Christmas to many, many people in this time of year. So just something to keep in mind. This is just, I don't mean to rub anybody the wrong way if this conflicts with your beliefs. I'm just talking sort of historically and mythologically where some of these ideas come from, and how Shamanism underlies a lot of our mythology, from Santa Claus to the hero's journey. If you're familiar with the hero's journey as outlined by Joseph Campbell, these stories that are so universal, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to Star Wars and Dune today, over many, many thousands of years, we have had these stories that have followed kind of the same plot line, where we've had a hero who, departs on adventure and, gains some powers and brings them back, and, and changes the world as this hero's journey mimics shamanic initiation. It is a representation of traditional shamanic initiation. Something not a lot of people understand. Some people understand this, but this is why these stories are so critical to us. These are why these stories are so important, so long lasting. Get shared, get repackaged, into Star Wars or Dune or whatever, and why they have such broad appeal. Because the shaman, the figure, the archetype of the shaman, whether it shows up as Santa Claus or Luke Skywalker or Ben Kenobi or whoever, Paul Atreides in Dune. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit of a sci-fi nerd as well. Or, characters from, the Odyssey, or characters from Gilgamesh, or characters from Beowulf, or whatever. Why does this show up over and over and over again? Because the archetype of the shaman is so important. And I will do a whole video on actually the shamanic archetype and the shamanic awakening that happens in every culture. Every single culture in the world has shamanic awakening of some sort as an underpinning. Shamanism is a human thing. It's not, there are a lot of arguments that shamanism belongs to a single culture. And I get that those arguments are ignorant, and I'm not insulting the people who are making them. I am ignorant of many things that I have not studied, whatever. It's just that they don't come from a place of knowledge. Shamanism is universal, meaning it's happened in every culture around the world and at all times, and it is an archetype in the collective consciousness of humankind. Shamanism belongs to the human race as a whole, and I firmly, strongly believe in that. And so I meant this to be sort of a tongue-in-cheek, fun kind of video with some information behind it, and I'm going off on a tangent now, but Santa Claus was a shaman. You can have a different opinion of that. It's totally fine, but these are just some things that we've pulled together, and this character is important to us who have Santa Claus in our culture. Even if you don't, you have been exposed to Christmas movies or branding or all kinds of things with the image of Santa Claus, and have some understanding of what that means, even if you don't celebrate Christmas, even if you don't have Santa Claus in your culture. With that being said, I'm going to wrap this up. I hope you're happy and healthy, and you stay so during this holiday season. Stay safe, stay sane. Please subscribe to my channel. I have a lot more videos coming. There are a lot already here, but I do lots and lots of videos. I love sharing this stuff with you, and I will talk to you real soon.